He thought he had the perfect plan. Millionaire tech entrepreneur David Martinez publicly humiliated his 6 months pregnant wife at an elite Austin dinner, calling her unstable in front of investors. His stunning mistress smirked, watching Sarah Chen crumble. But David's naive wife had been quietly building a case for months. She discovered his secret offshore accounts, documented his psychological manipulation, and recorded him planning her destruction. By the time Sarah walked out of that restaurant, she had already triggered a devastating counterattack that would destroy David's empire and land him in federal prison. This is how underestimating a determined woman became one man's most expensive mistake. Hit like, drop your thoughts below, and subscribe, because what happens next will absolutely shock you. Sarah Chen stared at the crumpled restaurant receipt, her 6-month pregnant belly pressed against the kitchen counter. 2 dinners at Chez Laurent, $87. Last Tuesday, when David had texted about working late, the handwritten note made her world tilt. Happy 6 months, baby. 6 months. The same as her pregnancy. Sarah, you home. David's voice echoed through their Austin apartment. She shoved the receipt into her pocket as David appeared, all charming smile and expensive cologne. His startup Dataflow Solutions had just hit $8 million in valuation. Hey, beautiful. How was your day? Fine. How was the investor meeting? Exhausting. Had to take Johnson to dinner downtown to seal the deal. The lie rolled off his tongue smoothly. Sarah wondered how many others she had swallowed. Which place? Some French spot. Expensive, but worth it. We landed the funding. That night, as David slept, Sarah lay awake searching for signs she had missed. The late nights starting 6 months ago. New cologne. The way he smiled at his phone before hiding it. The next morning, Sarah called Maya Patel, her best friend and one of Austin's top divorce attorneys. I need to see you. Wear your lawyer hat, not your friend hat. Maya's office overlooked Lady Bird Lake, sharp, fierce, with confidence from winning cases against men who underestimated her. Show me. Sarah handed over the receipt. Maya studied it intently. 6 months, same as your pregnancy. Sarah told her about the late nights, secretiveness, financial changes. Maya's expression grew serious. I want to hire a private investigator. I can't afford that. You can't afford not to. Sarah, if David is planning to leave, he's been preparing for 6 months. That's not casual. That's an exit strategy. The words hit like a physical blow. But the baby makes you more vulnerable. Texas is community property. But if he proves you're unfit, he gets custody and avoids support payments. You think he would do that? Men who cheat on pregnant wives are capable of anything. We need to know what you're dealing with before you confront him. That afternoon, Sarah called the private investigator Maya recommended. Mrs. Chen, I can have findings within 48 hours. But are you prepared for what we might find? Sarah looked up at the apartment where she had planned to raise her child. I need to know the truth. What she didn't know was that the truth would be far worse than anything she could imagine. Elena Volkov adjusted her red lipstick at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where she and David had celebrated their 6-month anniversary. Tonight was business. At 26, Elena had perfected being underestimated. Her Instagram following saw lifestyle content. They didn't see the calculating mind behind curated posts. She had studied David Martinez before making her move. Dataflow was growing fast, but David was insecure about sophistication. He had money, but no class. Elena had class, but needed money. You look stunning, David said as she returned to their private dining room. He had reserved it for potential investors. Elena smiled. Thank you. I'm excited to meet your friends. She wasn't meeting them as David's girlfriend. She was Elena Volkov, art consultant, helping David curate pieces for Dataflow's headquarters. Convenient fiction, allowing them public appearances while maintaining his devoted husband image. The investors arrived on schedule, Richard Chen and Patricia Williams, exactly the sophisticated money Elena had grown up around in wealthy Houston. Elena comes from art collectors, David explained. She's helping me build a collection reflecting Dataflow's innovative spirit. Elena played perfectly, discussing market trends with insider knowledge that impressed tech entrepreneurs. David beamed as her sophistication reflected on his judgment. "Your wife must love the art collection," Patricia said. David's smile flickered. "Sarah's focused on the baby. She doesn't understand art." Elena felt familiar thrill, the opening she had waited for. Pregnancy can be overwhelming. Some women lose themselves in the process. Exactly. Sarah used to be sharp, engaged. Now she's scattered, emotional. I worry about her stress handling. Elena made mental notes. David was already building Sarah's instability narrative. The dinner succeeded. Elena charmed investors. David closed funding. Everyone celebrated. Later at David's secret downtown loft. Elena scrolled through Sarah's social media while David showered. Sarah Chen was ordinary pretty. Instagram filled with pregnancy updates, marketing tips, healthy meals. She looked happy, trusting. Elena felt no guilt studying her target. "What are you thinking about?" David asked. "Your situation. Have you considered what happens after the baby?" "What do you mean, legally?" "You'll be tied to Sarah 18 years. Unless you prove she's unfit." "Elena, I'm not suggesting dishonesty, but postpartum depression is real. If Sarah had documented mental health issues, it would affect custody." David was quiet. Elena saw wheels turning. He understood cost-benefit analysis. How would someone document mental health issues? Elena smiled. Security cameras, voice recordings, medical records showing erratic behavior or prenatal care failure. Over the next hour, Elena planted seeds. Sarah showed paranoia, asking about schedules. She struggled emotionally with pregnancy. She had isolated herself, quit working, became financially dependent. "Community property laws are complex," Elena said. If Sarah became problematic during divorce, it could tie up assets for years. But if there were mental stability questions, unstable people make unreliable witnesses. David was engaged. "What are you thinking?" "Documentation, evidence of instability, something court-worthy." Elena showed David a recording app. This records continuously, uploads to cloud storage. If Sarah had an emotional breakdown during recording. "You want me to secretly record my wife. I want you protecting yourself and your child from potentially unstable situations." By night's end, David agreed to install discrete recording devices. Elena volunteered to help, claiming interest in security systems. What David didn't know was Elena was also recording their conversations. Everything he said about Sarah, every plan, every conspiracy moment was saved to Elena's private cloud. Elena hadn't survived family financial scandals through sentimentality. Loyalty was unaffordable luxury. If David thought he was using her to destroy Sarah, fine. But Elena was playing a longer game, collecting evidence on everyone. The next morning, Elena posted a gallery photo. Sometimes the most beautiful art comes from unexpected places. Trust the process. Followers assumed she meant art. David assumed their relationship. Sarah, checking Instagram at her prenatal appointment, saw the post and felt inexplicable chill. Something about the woman seemed familiar. Elena smiled, seeing Sarah had viewed her story. The game was beginning. Sarah's hands shook, reading the private investigator's report. 23 photographs, 17 occasions, 6 months of documented evidence that David was living a double life. David holding hands with a stunning brunette. David kissing her at an upscale hotel, David and the mystery woman at restaurants, her apartment, his secret downtown loft Sarah never knew existed. "Her name is Elena Volkov," Maya said, sliding into the coffee shop booth. 26, daughter of Viktor Volkov, who went to federal prison for securities fraud. She's got bankruptcy and a pattern of dating wealthy men. Each photograph felt like a knife twist. "Sarah, there's more." Maya showed another tablet. This was planned. Elena studied him, his business, his social circle. She approached him strategically. Elena had attended 3 networking events David frequented before introduction. She had liked his LinkedIn posts for weeks before first interaction. She had visited Dataflow's website multiple times from different IP addresses. She's a predator, and David fell completely. Worse was coming. Financial records showed David moving money into accounts Sarah couldn't access. Over 6 months, nearly $200,000 had been diverted from joint savings. "He's been planning since before you got pregnant. Sarah, this isn't just a fair. This is exit strategy." What kind of woman targets a pregnant woman's husband? The kind desperate and smart enough to know pregnancy makes women vulnerable. Sarah thought about David encouraging reduced work hours, focusing on baby, letting him handle finances. She had thought he was protective. Now she realized he had been isolating her. "I need to confront him." "Not yet. You're thinking emotionally. If you confront him now, you lose any advantage." "What advantage could I possibly have?" "Element of surprise. David thinks you're clueless. Elena thinks you're no threat. They're being sloppy because they underestimate you." Maya leaned forward. "Sarah, I've seen this dozens of times. Wife finds out, confronts husband, gets emotional. Suddenly she's the crazy one. Meanwhile, he's been preparing for months. You need to prepare too." That evening, Sarah sat outside Dataflow watching David through conference room windows. He was animated, passionate. This was the David she had loved. Her phone buzzed. "Big breakthrough with investors. Might be late celebrating. Love you both." Sarah knew the celebration involved Elena. She drove home trying to act normal. Made dinner, folded baby clothes, pretended to care about nursery paint colors. Every domestic task felt surreal. David came home smelling like wine and Elena's perfume. He kissed Sarah's forehead, asked about her day with the same caring tone. The performance was flawless. Later, after David slept, Sarah crept to his office and photographed his computer screen. What she found was worse than imagined. David hadn't just moved money. He had opened credit cards in both names, maxed them on purchases for Elena, art, jewelry, even a car. All community debts Sarah would be responsible for. He had also researched divorce attorneys and child custody laws, browser history full of searches like proving spouse unfit mother and hidden assets in divorce. David hadn't just planned to leave her. He had planned to destroy her. Sarah photographed everything, hands steady despite racing heart. Maya had trained her well. Document everything. Trust no one. Assume the worst. As she crept back to bed, Sarah felt something unexpected, pure, clean anger that burned away self-doubt and heartbreak. David thought she was naive. Elena thought she was weak. They assumed she would be an easy victim. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Sarah Chen had built marketing campaigns that destroyed competitors. She had a communications degree and talent for reading motivations. She had survived corporate politics and client betrayals that would have broken weaker people. David had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated his wife. As she lay beside him, listening to peaceful sleep while her world crumbled, Sarah began planning. Not just escape, but revenge. Tomorrow, she would start building her secret arsenal. The Driscoll Hotel's dining room buzzed with Austin's elite. Sarah adjusted her black maternity dress, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. This dinner was crucial for Dataflow's future. "You look beautiful," David said, his hand on her back. To observers, they looked like the perfect expecting couple. Sarah knew better. She had spent the week documenting David's lies per Maya's instructions. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet Elena Volkov," David said smoothly. "Elena is an art consultant helping us select pieces for the new office." Sarah's blood turned ice. The woman from photographs stood before her, elegant and poised. "Such a pleasure to finally meet you," Elena said, honey sweet with hint of accent. "David has told me so much." "How nice. David didn't mention you." Flicker of something passed through Elena's eyes. They joined two investor couples David had courted for months. What followed was the most surreal 90 minutes of Sarah's life. Elena played perfectly. Discussing art with sophistication Sarah knew David envied. Meanwhile, David began his performance. "Sarah's been having such a hard time with pregnancy," he said during appetizers, voice full of concerned sympathy. "Doctor says some women struggle more." Sarah stared. "I haven't been having problems." David, "Honey, you've been so emotional. Remember last week when you cried over that commercial?" The table laughed politely. Heat rose in Sarah's cheeks. She had cried at a military families commercial. Normal emotional response, not instability sign. "Pregnancy hormones," Elena said understandingly. "My sister went through the same. Some women get overwhelmed." Sarah realized with horror this entire dinner was orchestrated to make her look unstable before witnesses. "I think I'm handling everything quite well." "Of course, sweetheart," David said patronizingly. "But you have to admit, you've been forgetful. Yesterday, you couldn't remember taking prenatal vitamins." Sarah's mouth fell open. She never forgot vitamins. David was lying, creating false incompetence narrative. "I remember perfectly." "See?" David told the table with indulgent smile. "She gets defensive about everything now." Elena nodded sympathetically. "Pregnancy can be hard on a woman's sense of self." Sarah felt trapped. Every response confirmed their narrative. Stay quiet, appear weak, defend herself, seem defensive and emotional. Main course arrived. Sarah hoped focus would shift to business. Instead, David escalated. "Elena, didn't you mention that article about pregnancy and decision-making abilities?" "Oh yes, it's fascinating research about pregnancy hormones affecting judgment and memory. Completely natural, nothing shameful." One investor, clearly uncomfortable, tried changing subjects. David, expansion plans. Actually relevant. Sarah used to handle some marketing, but we've brought in outside help. Pregnancy really affected her focus. Sarah's vision went red. Complete lie. She never worked for Dataflow officially, though informal advice had proved valuable. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I've never been employed by Dataflow." "Not employed, but you gave me ideas. Remember before pregnancy fog set in?" Elena leaned forward with apparent concern. "Must be frustrating to feel like you're losing yourself." That's when Sarah understood the full scope. They weren't just making her look unstable tonight. They were building months-long case David could use in divorce court. Every public appearance, witnessed interaction was evidence Sarah Chen was mentally unfit for motherhood. Realization hit like physical blow. Her hand instinctively protected her belly. "I need air." "See?" David told the table, voice full of patient suffering. "This is what I deal with daily. Mood swings, paranoia." Sarah stared at her husband as he systematically destroyed her reputation before Austin's business elite. "You're right. I do need air." but not because I'm unstable. She looked directly at Elena. Because the air suddenly smells like lies and cheap perfume. Dead silence. Elena's composed mask slipped, revealing calculating predator underneath. "Sarah," David warned sharply. "No. David, I'm done pretending everything's fine. Done letting you gaslight me publicly. And done being polite to your mistress." She turned to stunned investors. "I apologize for confusion about my mental state. I assure you, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months." Sarah Chen walked out with head held high, leaving behind wreckage of her marriage and beginning of her war. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like herself again. The naive, trusting wife was gone. In her place was a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Sarah's phone buzzed continuously as she drove from the hotel, but she ignored it. Maya's plan: document everything. Say nothing. Wait for David's next move. David came home at midnight, controlled fury masking his face. Sarah sat in the living room, still in her black dress. "What the hell was that?" he hissed. "That was me finally seeing clearly. You humiliated me before my investors. Do you know what you've done? I told the truth. Is that humiliating? The truth, you're having a breakdown. Elena was trying to help you understand what's happening to your mind. Elena was helping you build a case against me." David's eyes narrowed. "You're paranoid, Sarah. Seriously paranoid. Maybe talk to Dr. Williams about medication." The suggestion chilled Sarah. David was still building his narrative. Every word could prove she was unstable. "I'm not paranoid. David, I'm informed." Something in her tone made him pause. Uncertainty flickered across his face. "What does that mean?" Sarah stood slowly. "It means I know about your downtown loft, the $200,000 you stole from savings, Elena's criminal family in bankruptcy, and I know you've been planning this 6 months." David went white. "You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself and my child from a liar and thief. Sarah, listen." David's voice shifted to reasonable, caring tone. "I know how this looks, but you're not thinking clearly. Pregnancy is affecting your judgment. Stop. Just stop. I've heard enough lies." David pulled out his phone. "Dr. Williams. Sorry to call late, but I'm concerned about Sarah. She's having paranoid delusions, accusing me of stealing money and affairs. Yes, tonight she had a complete meltdown in public." Sarah watched in horror as David performed for her obstetrician, painting her as unstable while sounding like concerned husband. "I think she needs immediate evaluation. I'm worried about her and the baby's safety." "Hang up, David." "No, I think we need professional help. She's clearly not capable of rational decisions." Sarah realized the genius of David and Elena's plan. They hadn't just been discrediting her socially, they had been building medical case for incompetence. David ended with promises to bring Sarah in Monday morning. "Dr. Williams agrees you need help. Sarah, I love you, but you're sick." That night in the nursery, Sarah called David's number and recorded everything. "David, when you called Dr. Williams, you said I was having paranoid delusions. What exactly did you mean for 20 minutes? Sarah guided David through his version. She got him to describe her instability in detail, repeat mental health concerns, and explain why he thought she was imagining his affair. "I've never cheated. Sarah, Elena is business associate. Nothing more. The fact you think otherwise shows how distorted your thinking has become." By call's end, David had given her everything: complete affair denial, financial concern dismissal, repeated assertions she was mentally unstable. All recorded and uploaded to Maya's secure server. Saturday. David was solicitous and caring, suggesting they spend quiet day preparing for baby. While David worked in his office, Sarah implemented Maya's next phase. She photographed every document, uploaded bank records, forwarded Elena's business emails from David's computer. The emails were devastating. Elena's communications weren't professional art consultant correspondence. They were intimate, strategic, full of specific plans for destroying Sarah's credibility. One email made Sarah's blood run cold. David, pregnancy gives us timeline. Once baby's born, Sarah will be more vulnerable. Postpartum depression affects 60% of mothers. With proper documentation, you could have full custody within 6 months. Another contained detailed psychological profile of Sarah, including weaknesses, triggers, and best methods for provoking emotional responses that could be recorded as instability evidence. Elena hadn't just seduced David. She had studied Sarah like a lab specimen. By Saturday evening, Maya had everything needed to destroy David and Elena's plans. But she warned the next phase would be dangerous. They're going to escalate. When manipulative people lose control, they become desperate. David thinks he's won, but he's about to discover he's been playing checkers while we've been playing chess. What's our next move? We spring our trap, but once we do this, there's no going back. Ready. Sarah looked around the apartment she had shared with David, at the nursery they had planned together. I'm ready. Good. Monday morning, Dr. Williams gets a very interesting package. By Monday afternoon, David Martinez will wish he never met Elena Volkov. Dr. Patricia Williams had delivered over 3,000 babies, but never received a package like Monday morning's delivery from Maya Patel's law office. Inside were medical records, financial documents, recorded calls, and detailed timelines showing patient Sarah Chen was being systematically, psychologically abused by her husband and mistress. Most damning was David's recorded call to Dr. Williams, followed by transcript of his conversation with Sarah that same night, where he admitted lying to the doctor about Sarah's mental state. Dr. Williams had suspected something during Sarah's recent appointments. The vibrant, confident woman had become increasingly anxious. At the time, she attributed it to pregnancy stress. Now she realized she had witnessed psychological warfare. When Sarah arrived at 9 a.m., she looked exhausted but determined. David was with her, playing concerned husband perfectly. Doctor, thank you for seeing us. I'm really worried about Sarah's mental state after Friday night. Yes, let's discuss Friday night. Sarah, tell me what happened. Sarah recounted the dinner calmly, clearly, without emotion. David's public humiliation, Elena's calculated manipulation, systematic gaslighting building for months. David interrupted repeatedly. See, doctor, she's still having paranoid delusions about Elena. Mr. Martinez, please let your wife finish. Something in the doctor's tone made David pause. He expected immediate validation of concerns about Sarah's mental health. Instead, she seemed to take Sarah's account seriously. Sarah, you mentioned David told you I agreed you needed immediate psychiatric evaluation. Is that correct? Yes, he called you Friday night. Dr. Williams nodded. Mr. Martinez, could you step out? I'd like to examine Sarah privately. I don't think that's a good idea. Given her mental state, I should stay. In 20 years, I've never had a husband refuse to leave during private examination. Please wait in the lobby. David's mask slipped, revealing irritation, but he couldn't refuse without seeming controlling. Once David was gone, Dr. Williams' demeanor changed completely. Sarah, I never told your husband you were having mental breakdown. Your mental health has never been a concern. Sarah's eyes filled with relief tears. So you don't think I'm unstable? I think you're being abused. What you've described is textbook psychological manipulation designed to make you doubt your sanity. Dr. Williams pulled out Maya's package. Your attorney sent disturbing information. What your husband and this woman have done is criminal. For 30 minutes, Dr. Williams explained medical and legal implications. Psychological abuse stress could harm Sarah and baby. Deliberate manipulation of medical professionals could constitute fraud. Systematic isolation and financial control were classic domestic abuse signs. But he's never hit me. Physical abuse isn't the only kind, and often not most damaging. David has been trying to destroy your sense of reality. It's called gaslighting. Dr. Williams wrote detailed medical report documenting Sarah's excellent mental health and stress symptoms consistent with psychological abuse. She noted David's attempts to manipulate medical professionals. When David returned, Dr. Williams was professional but cold. Mr. Martinez, I've completed examination. Sarah is in excellent mental and physical health. Her stress levels are elevated, consistent with current circumstances. David showed confusion, but her paranoid behavior is rational response to being systematically lied to and manipulated. Temperature dropped 10 degrees. David realized his narrative was crumbling. Doctor, I think you're misunderstanding. No, Mr. Martinez, you're misunderstanding. I've documented everything Sarah told me, and I'll report my concerns to appropriate authorities. David stood abruptly. Sarah, we're leaving. Actually, Sarah is my patient, not you. She can make her own medical care decisions. Sarah looked between husband and doctor, then made the choice that would change everything. I'm staying. David's facade cracked completely. Sarah, don't be stupid. You need me. You can't survive alone. Mr. Martinez, I'm asking you to leave my office. Security. As security escorted David out, he turned back with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've done. You think you're smart? I'll destroy you. The mask was completely off. This was real David Martinez, not charming entrepreneur, but man who viewed his pregnant wife as property to control or destroy. After David left, Dr. Williams spent another hour with Sarah, explaining abuse victim resources and safety planning. The next few weeks are most dangerous. Men like David don't give up easily, and often escalate when losing control. Sarah felt simultaneously terrified and liberated. For the first time in months, a medical professional validated her reality instead of questioning her sanity. What happens now? Now you follow your attorney's plan. You've documented everything needed to destroy David's credibility. But be careful, Sarah. He's going to try hurting you before this ends. As Sarah left, she felt stronger than she had in months. David had lost his most important weapon, ability to make her doubt herself. But Dr. Williams was right about danger. David was about to discover his wife had been gathering evidence, and his response would be swift and vicious. The real war was just beginning. Elena Volkov stared at her phone in disbelief. David's text was incoherent rage. Everything is falling apart. Sarah knows. The doctor won't cooperate. We need to escalate now. She had expected this. Men like David always underestimated opponents until too late. Now he was panicking, making him dangerous and stupid. Elena had survived her father's federal prosecution by being smarter than everyone else. She had contingency plans for every scenario, including David's inevitable meltdown. Her first call was to her attorney, a criminal defense lawyer specializing in white-collar crime. Robert, I need immediate legal protection. The situation has become complicated. What kind of complicated? The kind where I might need immunity in exchange for testimony. Elena had been recording every conversation with David since their first meeting. She had copies of every email, financial transaction, every piece of evidence showing David's plan to defraud his wife. If David was going down, Elena was not going down with him. Her second call was to Carlos Restrepo, David's business partner. "Carlos, I think you should know David has been moving company money into personal accounts." Elena forwarded screenshots of transfers David had shown her proudly. "David has been using data flow resources for personal expenses. I thought you should know before this becomes legal issue." "Elena, why are you telling me this?" "Because I respect you and don't want to see you hurt by David's poor decisions." Meanwhile, Sarah was implementing Maya's emergency plan. They had 48 hours before David realized the full extent of what they had gathered. Maya's office had transformed into war room. Documents covered every surface financial fraud, psychological abuse, adultery, business fraud. "Sarah, we need to move fast. David is going to try destroying evidence and intimidating witnesses. We're filing for emergency custody protection today." "Can he really take the baby?" "Not if we file first and document his abusive behavior. But Sarah, he's going to escalate." Maya was right. David's response came Tuesday morning as restraining order against Sarah, claiming she was danger to herself and unborn child. But Maya was ready with devastating counterpetition. Sarah's filing included Dr. Williams's medical report, Maya's fraud evidence, recordings of David's lies to medical professionals, and most damaging, Elena's own emails detailing their plan to destroy Sarah's credibility. "How did you get Elena's emails?" Maya smiled grimly. "Elena's lawyer contacted me this morning. She's decided David is too much liability. She's willing to testify against him in exchange for immunity." Elena is switching sides. Elena is protecting Elena. She never cared about David. She was using him. And now that he's becoming dangerous, she's cutting losses. Wednesday morning brought emergency custody hearing. Sarah sat in courthouse, 6 months pregnant and exhausted, facing the man she had once loved. David had hired Leonard Singer, aggressive divorce attorney. Singer immediately attacked. "Your Honor, Mrs. Chen has exhibited increasingly unstable behavior. She has made wild accusations, had public outbursts, and is clearly not capable of rational pregnancy decisions." Maya stood calmly. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that Mrs. Chen is victim of systematic psychological abuse campaign designed to make her appear unstable." 2 hours of devastating testimony followed. Dr. Williams testified about David's attempts to manipulate medical records. Private investigator presented photographic evidence. Carlos testified about suspicious business transactions. But the nuclear bomb was Elena Volkov's testimony. Elena, dressed conservatively and speaking clearly, detailed the entire conspiracy against Sarah. She provided recordings of David planning Sarah's psychological destruction. She showed emails where David called their unborn child leverage, most damaging. Elena played recording of David saying, "Sarah's pregnancy makes her weak and emotional. We can use that against her in court. Pregnant women always look unstable compared to rational men." As Elena testified, Sarah watched David's face transform from confident anger to desperate panic to cold rage. The judge looked disgusted. "Mr. Martinez, based on evidence presented today, you have engaged in systematic psychological abuse of your pregnant wife, financial fraud, and attempted manipulation of medical and legal professionals." "Your Honor, this woman is clearly lying." Singer protested. "This woman provided recordings and documents corroborating every aspect of her testimony. Mr. Martinez, I am granting Mrs. Chen's petition for emergency protection and denying your counterpetition completely." The ruling was swift and comprehensive. David was ordered to stay away from Sarah, surrender passport, submit to financial monitoring. All marital assets were frozen. But biggest shock came when Carlos stood up. Your Honor, Dataflow Solutions is terminating Mr. Martinez's employment and cooperating with federal authorities investigating possible securities fraud. David's empire crumbled in real time. Wife outsmarted him. Mistress betrayed him. Business partner fired him. Federal investigators were examining his financial crimes. As Sarah left courthouse, she felt mixture of relief and exhaustion. Immediate danger was over, but she knew David would not accept defeat gracefully. Sarah, this is huge victory, but it's not over. David is cornered now, which makes him more dangerous than ever. Maya was right to be concerned. That evening, David Martinez sat in his loft, staring at ruins of his life and planning one final desperate gambit. David Martinez had not slept in 36 hours. His loft felt like prison. Empty wine bottles littered the coffee table, laptop screen glowing with evidence of desperation. Every asset he could liquidate was being converted to cryptocurrency and transferred overseas. His passport was surrendered, but David had connections. People who owed favors. Fake identity was possible. Disappearing was possible. But first, he wanted Sarah to pay. Elena's recordings played in court echoed in his mind. His own voice, callous and calculating, dismissing his unborn child as leverage. The judge's disgusted expression, pitying looks from people who once respected him. Sarah had destroyed his reputation, business, future. She deserved to understand real loss. David pulled up Sarah's social media. She hadn't posted since court, but friends were rallying around her. Support messages, help offers, promises she was better off without him. The narrative was being written without his input. Sarah was brave survivor. He was abusive monster. Elena was reformed accomplice. David opened new browser window and began typing. The blog post was titled "The Truth About Sarah Chen, a Warning to Other Men." David crafted what he believed was his masterpiece, detailed account of Sarah's mental instability, her manipulation of medical professionals, her conspiracy with Elena. He included carefully edited conversation portions, taking Sarah's words out of context to make her sound paranoid and vindictive. He described her pregnancy as trap, designed to secure financial support. The post was anonymous, published on multiple platforms, designed to go viral in Austin's business community. But David wasn't finished. His second project was more dangerous detailed dossier on Maya Patel's legal career, highlighting every case she had lost, every dissatisfied client, every ethical complaint. The dossier was sent anonymously to Texas State Bar, Maya's law firm partners, and several prominent judges. David's final project was most personal. He created fake social media accounts and began systematically harassing everyone who had supported Sarah publicly. By Thursday evening, David felt like he was fighting back. Sarah wanted to destroy his reputation, he would destroy hers. What David didn't realize was Maya had been anticipating his response. Every blog post, fake account, harassing message was being documented by the same private investigator who had exposed David's affair. Maya's law firm immediately recognized anonymous attacks and alerted authorities. More importantly, David's digital revenge campaign was generating evidence of ongoing harassment and intimidation, evidence for criminal court. Friday morning brought consequences. FBI agents raided his loft, seizing computers and financial records related to securities fraud investigation. But the raid revealed something that sent Sarah and Maya into emergency mode. David had been researching Sarah's daily routine, prenatal appointments, favorite restaurants. His browser history suggested planning beyond digital harassment. Sarah, you need to disappear for a few days. David is escalating beyond anything we prepared for. I can't just hide. I have appointments, meetings. Cancel them all. David is not thinking rationally. He's destroyed his own life, and now he's focused entirely on hurting you. Maya was arranging safe house when Elena called with information that changed everything. Maya, David contacted me an hour ago. He wants to meet tonight to discuss our situation. He said he has something that will change the game completely. What kind of something? I don't know, but he sounded unhinged. He kept talking about making Sarah understand consequences and teaching her about real loss. Maya's blood ran cold. Elena, under no circumstances should you meet with him. I wasn't planning to, but Maya, I think he's planning to hurt Sarah physically. The way he was talking wasn't about money or custody anymore. It was about punishment. That evening, as Sarah sat in Safe House Hotel 30 miles outside Austin, Maya coordinated with law enforcement. David's harassment had escalated to criminal stalking. His witness intimidation attempts could result in federal obstruction charges. Most importantly, Elena's testimony about David's violent intentions prompted police to issue emergency protective order with immediate enforcement. When police arrived at David's loft Friday night, they found him in final stages of complete mental breakdown. His walls were covered with printed photos of Sarah, Elena, Maya, and Carlos. Red string connected photos like conspiracy theorists' fever dream. David had written detailed plans for confronting each person who had betrayed him. Plans included following Sarah to prenatal appointments, confronting Elena at her apartment, exposing Maya's corruption to media. Most disturbing was David's journal, filled with increasingly violent fantasies about making Sarah pay for destroying everything. David Martinez was arrested for criminal harassment, stalking, intimidation of witnesses, and multiple financial crimes. His mental state was deemed sufficiently unstable to warrant psychiatric evaluation. As Sarah sat in Safe House, watching news reports of David's arrest, she felt a mixture of relief and profound sadness. This was not how she had imagined her marriage ending. But the man who had been arrested was not the man she had married. That man had been replaced by someone capable of systematic psychological torture and potential physical violence. Maya called with updates throughout the night. David would be held without bail pending psychiatric evaluation. FBI had recovered evidence of extensive financial fraud that could result in decades in federal prison. It's over. Sarah, David is never going to hurt you or your baby again. As Sarah rubbed her belly and felt her daughter kick, she realized Maya was right. It was over. Tomorrow, she would begin rebuilding her life. Tonight, she would mourn the death of her marriage and prepare to raise her child alone. David had tried to destroy her. Instead, he had forged her into steel. 3 months later. Sarah Chen stood in the nursery of her new apartment, holding her daughter, Emma Grace Chen. Morning sun streamed through windows overlooking tree-lined South Austin Street. The apartment was smaller than the home she had shared with David, but felt infinitely larger. No hidden cameras, no secret accounts, no lies poisoning the air, just Sarah, Emma, and peaceful quiet of a life rebuilt. She's beautiful, Maya said, settling into the rocking chair. She looks just like you. Sarah smiled down at Emma's sleeping face. Emma had been born healthy and perfect 2 weeks ago, despite all the stress. Dr. Williams had joked that babies born from strong mothers tend to be fighters. Any word on David's sentencing? Maya's expression darkened. Federal court scheduled it for next month. Between securities fraud, harassment charges, and psychological abuse documentation, he's looking at 12 to 15 years minimum. David's downfall had been swift and complete. FBI investigation uncovered web of financial crimes stretching back years before he met Sarah. He had been stealing from investors, manipulating company books, using data flow as personal piggy bank. Elena's cooperation had been invaluable, revealing true scope of David's criminal behavior. He hadn't just been planning to leave Sarah. He had been planning to disappear entirely with millions in stolen funds. What about Elena? Immunity deal in exchange for testimony. She's relocating to California, starting over with new identity. Elena had been predator, but smart enough to recognize when David became dangerous. Her betrayal had felt like justice, even though motives were purely self-serving. Carlos stopped by yesterday. Dataflow is thriving without David. He offered me consulting contract. Are you interested? Sarah looked down at Emma, who was beginning to stir. Maybe in few months. Right now, I just want to focus on being mom. Financial settlement had been generous. David's criminal restitution requirements meant Sarah would receive significant monthly payments for 18 years. Sale of shared assets provided enough for comfortable life. More importantly, Sarah had discovered her own strength during crisis. Marketing skills had proven invaluable in documenting David's abuse and building legal case. She was already getting inquiries from other women facing similar situations. I've been thinking about starting nonprofit, something that helps women document domestic abuse and financial fraud. Maya smiled. Perfect idea. And I know a good lawyer who would be happy to help with legal structure. As they talked, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a naive wife who trusted blindly. David's betrayal had shattered that innocence, but revealed capabilities Sarah hadn't known she possessed. She had outmaneuvered calculating sociopath and accomplished manipulator. She had navigated complex legal proceedings while 6 months pregnant. She had exposed financial crimes law enforcement had missed for years. Most importantly, she had protected her daughter from father who viewed children as leverage rather than blessings. Sarah, I need to ask something. Do you ever regret how this all turned out? Sarah considered seriously. There had been moments of grief, mourning for marriage she thought she had, for father she wished Emma could have had, but regret, no. David made his choices. Every lie, every manipulation, every cruel decision was his choice. I just refused to be victim of those choices. Emma woke then, looking around nursery with curious dark eyes. Sarah picked up her daughter, marveling at tiny perfect features. You know what the strangest part is? I'm happier now than when I was married. Even with all challenges, even as single mother, I feel more like myself than I have in years. That's because you're not living in someone else's story anymore. You're writing your own. Sarah's phone buzzed with text from unknown number. Hi, Sarah. This is Jennifer Walsh. My friend gave me your number. I'm going through something similar with my husband and desperately need advice. Can we talk? Sarah showed the message to Maya, who nodded approvingly. Your nonprofit is already starting. Sarah typed back. Of course. Let's meet for coffee tomorrow afternoon. You're not alone in this. That evening, as Sarah fed Emma and watched sunset over Austin, she thought about dinner at Driscoll Hotel that had started this ordeal. David's public humiliation had been designed to break her spirit. Instead, it had awakened her survival instincts and revealed her true strength. Sarah Chen was no longer the woman who had married David Martinez. That woman had been trusting, dependent, willing to accept less than she deserved. The woman who remained was harder, smarter, and completely unbreakable. She was mother who would move heaven and earth to protect her child. She was survivor who refused to be victimized. She was fighter who had learned that best revenge was not just living well, but helping others live well too. As Emma drifted off to sleep, Sarah whispered promise to her daughter, "No one will ever make you feel small, baby girl. No one will ever convince you that you're crazy for trusting your instincts. And if anyone ever tries to hurt you, they'll have to go through me first." Outside, Austin's lights twinkled like promises of possibility. Sarah Chen had been publicly humiliated by millionaire husband who thought she was weak and disposable. Instead, she had proven that underestimating determined woman was the most expensive mistake a man could make. The war was over. Sarah had won, and the best part of her life was just beginning. 1 year later, Sarah Chen walked into the same Driscoll hotel where her old life had ended. This time, she carried herself with confidence of a woman who had survived war and emerged victorious. Austin Business Journal had named her one of the city's 40 under 40 rising leaders for her work with the Sarah Chen Foundation, a nonprofit that had helped over 200 women document domestic abuse and navigate complex divorce proceedings. Tonight's award ceremony felt like perfect symmetry. Maya walked beside her, 7 months pregnant and glowing. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "I've been ready for exactly 1 year." The ballroom was full of Austin's business elite, many who had witnessed David's public humiliation of his pregnant wife. Sarah noted their expressions: surprise, respect, and in some cases, shame for how quickly they had judged her. Elena Volkov was not at ceremony. She had relocated to Los Angeles, reportedly building legitimate art consulting business under assumed name. Sarah held no grudge. Elena had been key to David's destruction. Carlos approached during cocktails, his wife beside him. "Sarah, congratulations on the award. Dataflow's quarterly donations to your foundation are making real difference." "Thank you." "Carlos, how's business?" "Better than ever. Turns out, removing criminal leadership was good for company morale." He paused. "I owe you apology. I knew David was troubled, but didn't realize how dangerous he had become." "You couldn't have known. David was very good at hiding his true nature." Carlos's testimony had been crucial to David's conviction. His cooperation with federal investigators exposed financial crimes that added years to David's sentence. David Martinez was currently serving 14 years in federal prison. His appeals had been unsuccessful. Psychological evaluations revealed personality disorder, making him unsuitable for early release. He would not be eligible for parole until Emma was teenager. During awards ceremony, Sarah was recognized not just for nonprofit work, but for courage in exposing financial crimes that protected other potential victims. Sarah Chen represents the best of Austin's entrepreneurial spirit, the presenter announced. She turned personal tragedy into social good, creating resources that have helped hundreds of women protect themselves and their children. As Sarah accepted her award, she looked out at audience and saw Dr. Patricia Williams in front row, smiling proudly. "A year ago," Sarah began her speech, "I was a different person living different life. I thought I knew what strength was, what intelligence was, what love was. I was wrong about all those things." She paused, looking directly at several people who had been at original dinner. "I learned that strength isn't avoiding conflict. It's facing truth even when truth is painful. Intelligence isn't being smartest person in room. It's being smart enough to document everything and trust your instincts. And love isn't accepting abuse in name of keeping peace. It's protecting yourself and your children from people who would harm you." Complete silence. Women who contact my foundation often apologize for their situations. They apologize for staying too long, trusting too much, not seeing warning signs earlier. I tell them all, same thing: you have nothing to apologize for. The only person who should apologize is the person who chose to abuse, manipulate, and betray. Sarah's voice grew stronger. We live in society that asks women to be perfect victims, to be hurt enough to deserve sympathy, but not angry enough to demand justice, to be strong enough to survive, but not strong enough to fight back, to be smart enough to detect lies, but not smart enough to expose liars. Absolute quiet. I reject that standard. I was not perfect victim. I was imperfect woman who got angry enough to fight back, smart enough to document everything, and strong enough to destroy the man who tried to destroy me, and I'm not sorry about any of it." Thunderous, sustained applause. Sarah saw several women wiping away tears. Later, at reception, Sarah was approached by Jennifer Walsh, the first woman who had contacted her after David's arrest. "Sarah, I wanted you to meet someone. This is my daughter Sophie. She's applying to law school next year and says you're her inspiration." Sophie, confident young woman with bright eyes, shook Sarah's hand firmly. "Ms. Chen, my mom told me what you did, how you gathered evidence and built your case while everyone thought you were just victim. I want to be prosecutor like your friend Maya, helping women like my mom." Sarah felt surge of pride and purpose. This was why she had built Foundation, why she had turned trauma into activism. "Sophie, the world needs more women like you in law enforcement. If you need any letters of recommendation or internship connections, please let me know." As evening wound down, Sarah found herself back in same private dining room where David had humiliated her. This time, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and women whose lives had been changed by her Foundation's work. Maya joined her, protective hand on pregnant belly. "How does it feel to be back here?" Sarah looked around room, remembering the woman she had been that night, pregnant, trusting, unprepared for cruelty that was about to destroy her old life. "It feels like coming full circle. That night, I thought my world was ending. I had no idea it was just beginning. Any regrets?" Sarah thought about Emma, sleeping peacefully at home, about Foundation helping women across Texas, about strength she had discovered that she never knew existed. None. David thought he was destroying me when he humiliated me publicly. He thought he was proving I was weak, disposable, controllable. Sarah smiled, looking out at Austin's lights. Instead, he proved that underestimating determined woman is the most expensive mistake a man can make. He lost everything: his freedom, his money, his reputation, his child. I gained everything: my independence, my purpose, my true strength. Maya raised her sparkling water. To Sarah Chen, who turned public humiliation into public triumph. "To all the women who refuse to be victims," Sarah replied. As they left Driscoll Hotel, Sarah's phone buzzed with message from another woman seeking help. "Sarah, my husband is threatening to take my children if I leave him. He says he has evidence I'm unfit mother. I'm scared and don't know what to do. Can you help me?" Sarah typed back immediately, "You're not alone. Document everything. Trust your instincts. We'll talk tomorrow. You're stronger than you know." Walking out into warm Austin night, Sarah realized her story had become something larger than personal revenge or justice. It had become blueprint for other women trapped in similar situations. The Foundation's success had attracted national attention. Sarah had been invited to speak at conferences, sharing her strategy for documenting abuse. Publishers were courting her for book deal. But tonight, walking with Maya, Sarah felt most proud of simple text exchange with another woman in crisis. This was real impact, one woman at a time, one family at a time, one life at a time. David Martinez had tried to publicly humiliate his pregnant wife, thinking it would be final word in their relationship. Instead, it had been opening move in game where Sarah Chen held all winning cards. The millionaire husband who mocked his pregnant wife had gotten exactly what he deserved. And his wife had gotten something infinitely more valuable than revenge. She had gotten her life back.